الله أكبر. حط الهرم حط راسك يا زلمه في الجوادر. هاي جباتهم، هاي جباتهم جباتهم الهمس.
Israel's 9/11 also doesn't come with just the casualties, but also failed intelligence that allowed for the attacks to happen. Well, let's read some articles that I found very interesting today. This one from the Times of Israel. Surveillance soldiers warned of Hamas activity on Gaza border for months before October 7th. And this is a very, very damning article. And I'll read you the article while I get rid of the brutal Hamas massacre on October 7th was preceded by months of warning signs noted by IDF surveillance soldiers and disregarded as unimportant by intelligence officials, according to eyewitness accounts given in recent days. At least 3 months prior to the attack, 3 months, surveillance soldiers serving on a base in Nahal Oz reported signs that something unusual was underway at the already tumultuous Gaza border, situated a kilometer from them. The activity reported by the soldiers including information on Hamas operatives conducting training sessions multiple times a day, digging holes and placing explosives along the border. According to the accounts of the soldiers, no action was taken by those who received the reports. That sounds damningly similarly familiar with the intelligence services like the CIA and NSA, who are monitoring 2 known al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States, in which the FBI, working alongside both agencies at the Bin Laden issue station, tried to share this information with FBI headquarters, and they were told not to share that information under legal threats of prosecution for sharing CIA and NSA information. Why? Why? And the only thing difference is that we don't know the specifics. We can't say that the intelligence, the military, superiors anyway, wanted these attacks to happen so it could benefit from having the Palestinians expulsion out of Gaza and the West Bank. Well, that fits with the foreign policy of Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm going to get to that in a minute. IDF surveillance soldiers, referred to in Hebrew as Tatzpiamiyat, belong to the Combat Intelligence Corps and operate along the country's borders, as well as throughout the West Bank. The surveillance soldiers are referred to by many as the eyes of the army, as they provide real-time intelligence information to soldiers in the field. So in other words, while these people watching the cameras alongside the wall, they can relay the information about saying who's near the wall, how many people are near the wall, and to do something. Now, usually in the past, anybody near that wall gets a firing round. If it's a Palestinian kid, he gets shot in the leg or maybe even shot in the head. It's happened before. United Nations relief workers, Red Cross workers, and even journalists are shot. But you're telling me Hamas operatives with maps, tanks, jeeps, for months are allowed to operate, dig tunnels, and nothing happens? Come on, listen. I'm not a fringe conspiracy theorist, but I'm not a coincidence theorist either. They saw this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The soldiers gather information through a variety of cameras, sensors, and maps, and are expected to be acutely aware of every small change that happens in the 15 to 30 kilometers of land that they are responsible for each monitoring. Now, Every 15 to 30 kilometers, there's another unit watching a camera, another unit watching a camera, another unit in the field for that unit. This is multiple people. Once relevant information has been gathered by the surveillance soldiers, it is passed up the chain of command, including to intelligence officials, who then determine what steps need to be taken. However, according to the accounts of 2 surveillance soldiers stationed at a base in Kibbutz Nahalaz, the signs of what was to come on October 7th were never taken seriously. Just like when the international intelligence community tried to warn the United States about something big was going to happen regarding bin Laden's attack inside the United States. There's the infamous presidential daily brief, August 7th, that says on the title, bin Laden to strike inside the United States. Information for years prior to 9/11 was that Al-Qaeda was willing to hijack planes. Were there any stricter security measures at the airports? Were there any stricter security measures in immigration? No. Even with information coming from the FBI, from countries like Canada, Israel, Saudi Arabia, hey, vague warnings, but warnings from a specific entity, bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. In a segment aired on Khan News on Wednesday evening, 2 soldiers, Yael Rotenberg and Maya Disyanik, recounted their experiences in the months before the attack and up to 6:30 a.m. on Saturday, October 7th. Rotenberg recalled frequently seeing many Palestinians dressed in civilian clothing approach the border fence with maps, examining the ground around it and digging holes. So wait a minute, you're willing to tell me that they'll shoot anybody near the fence, fire a warning shot, but these people are building tunnels and they're allowed to? Look, even the hardcore conservative who's pro-Zionist can't defend this. That's why you won't see it in the legacy media. They won't report this. I will. And a few others will from the alt media. Because I want an informed public, a responsibly informed public. It's how we make changes. I don't need to show the fantastical. I don't need spooky music playing in the background. I need to read the reports as is to you and provide that information to you in the description, because that's all you need. Unfortunately, we don't have a media that reports honestly. One time when she passed the information on, she was told that they were farmers and there was none to worry about. Yeah, farmers digging underneath the border fence. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, wait, it gets worse. Rotenberg was asleep when the attack began, and of the surveillance soldiers who were in the living quarters that morning, she is the only one to have survived. Desniadnik, who was on duty, was the only other surveillance soldiers at the base not killed or abducted. And she was the one who reported to her superiors about what was happening. She was aware. Her superiors failed her. Now imagine you're an Israeli soldier. You did your job like Desniadnik here did. And I'll read you others. She's not the only one. Imagine the feeling of helplessness. Imagine you're a soldier who did their job trying to warn you of an impending attack, and you're ignored. The attack happens, your friends are killed. Maybe your friends and family are kidnapped. What about the Israelis who were killed at the rave or who were kidnapped? How do you think the families feel? Like shit, their government failed them. Why? Did they want the attacks to happen? Did Netanyahu really want the attacks to happen so that the ultimate goal of having a regional war with Iran, Syria, and Lebanon to get rid of Hezbollah, to become the only power player in the Middle East, along with Saudi Arabia, to get rid of the Palestinians out of Gaza and West Bank? Well, if it costs a few Israeli lives, so be it. That sounds familiar. Is that what happened on 9/11? A few American lives? All right, sad as it is. But the greater benefit of having a war with Iraq, a war with Afghanistan, A war with Libya and Syria later. Profiteering from the War Department, private military contractors like Halliburton. How about public contractors like LG3 Technologies, Raytheon, and Boeing? How about the foreign policy guidelines of the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia? How about the Patriot Act? How about warrantless wiretapping of every single American and every single person on the face of the planet? How about a blank check for the NSA, the CIA? How about the rendition and torture program? The National Defense Authorization Act of 2002, 2003. I could go on. It's infuriating, she told Conley, the intelligence failure. We saw what was happening. We told them about it, and we were the ones who were murdered. The Hamas terrorists were trained at the border fence nonstop, Destiny and Nick told Khan. At first, it was once a week, then once a day, then nearly constantly. In addition to passing on information about the frequency of the training going on at the fence, the surveillance soldiers said she collected evidence of the content of the training, which included how to drive a tank. What? How to drive a tank? How to cross into Israel via a tunnel? As the activity on the border increased, she realized it was just a matter of time until something happened. You mean the Hamas camera that I showed you playing before this video about them driving a tank, going through the border fence that she's talking about? Same fence. This is not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. Always remember that every terrorist event has a greater benefit. Did it benefit Hamas for these attacks? Not really. They're about to be destroyed. Now, the leadership, they're not in Gaza. They're in Qatar. That's where the funding comes from. And just like with the Israeli government, they were an asset. I'll read that in a minute. It benefited the Palestinians. Well, they're about to be expelled out of Gaza. And maybe the West Bank, too. Did it benefit the Israeli government? It sure did. Even at the behest of citizens, because the sacrifice is for the greater good of the Israeli government. That's not anti-Semitic to say so. That's not too fantastical to say so. You don't think governments would sacrifice their own people for a greater cause that they believe in? God's sakes, that happens with the United States almost all the time. Former Tasmiyat Amit Yerushalmi and Noah Melman corroborated the accounts of the two survivors in an interview published on Channel 12 on Thursday morning. So now there's more soldiers coming out. Yerushalmi had finished her mandatory service a month prior to October 7th and observed the increased activity on the Gaza border in the months leading up to her release. We sat on shifts and saw the convoy of vans. We saw the training, people shooting and rolling, practicing taking over a tank. The training went from once a week to twice a week, from every day to several times a day, she told Channel 12. We saw patrols along the border, people with cameras and binoculars. It happened 300 meters from the fence. There were a lot of disturbances. People went down to the fence and detonated an outrageous amount of explosives. The amount of explosives was crazy. Wait a minute. You're telling me that there was explosives near this border fence to create tunnels underneath the fence? They reported to the Israeli supervisors, and their supervisors said, ignore it. Where did that order come from? Did it come from the supervisors? I doubt it. Did it come from higher-ups and officials in government? Well, who is the prime minister? Benjamin Netanyahu. Who's the leader of the government? The Knesset, the Likud party. Starting to make sense now? Look, the only thing, just like with 9/11, in regarding pre-intelligence, is the specifics. But the warning signs are already here. Look at this. This is a damning report. I don't see Fox News covering this. I don't see a CNN covering this. I don't even see most of the big players on Twitter or YouTube covering this. I don't need to have the fantastical. It's right here. Like Rodenberg and Desniak, Yerushalmi said that she passed the information along, but that nobody seemed to take it seriously. I saw what was happening. I wrote everything down on the computer and passed it on. I don't know what happened with it. We don't actually know what they do with the information. Well, they sat on it. Just like when the CIA and the NSA knew about 2 known al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States who were coming from an al-Qaeda summit meeting in Malaysia, Khalid al-Minar and Nawaf Hazmi. The FBI found out about the cable, that they were inside the United States, that they had dual visas, tried to warn FBI headquarters, and they were told by the CIA not to share that information. They were told by the deputy chief of the Bin Laden issue station, Tom Wilshire, not to share that information. Who's Tom Wilshire's boss? Well, the chief of station, Richard Blee. Do we have anybody in the Israeli military like Richard Blee or Tom Wilshire? And maybe in time we'll find out. Because like the Israeli said, this is Israel's 9/11. Well, the casualty rates are nowhere near it, but the intelligence failures, boy, do they share some similarities. Oh, man, but the media won't tell you that. Melman finished a mandatory service some months ago, but told Channel 12 that even then, there were indications of what was to come, including a mock border fence set up by Hamas, in order for the terrorists to practice again and again, blowing up the border and crossing over the other side. I mean, holy cow. Are you telling me, just like when the terrorists, al-Qaeda, were training at flying schools, that the warning signs years prior to 9/11 were that al-Qaeda was going to train at flight schools? This is coming from the Bajinka plot dossiers of the FBI and Philippines National Police. That's 1996, friends. So you're telling me Israeli intelligence, Israeli soldiers saw mock exercises at the border fence, told their super superiors, hey, listen, there's mock exercises going on. Oh, don't worry about it. They're farmers. Our commanders told us to report what we saw, but everyone treated it like it was normal, like it was routine. What was normal about it? Has there been any time in history where you saw a large contingent of Hamas operatives working along the border fence, digging holes, mock border fences, tanks? I'm sorry, I'm not stupid enough to go for this facade. I'm willing to say, and I'm willing to bet my reputation, they knew what was going to happen and allowed it to happen, just like with 9/11. Now, with 9/11, it's a little bit harder. Here, it's freaking obvious. This is really obvious. On Wednesday evening, video footage was acquired in air by Channel 12 in which a convoy of white pickup trucks, which are favored by Hamas terrorists and were used on October 7th, can be seen driving past the border fence, at one point coming to a halt while those driving observed the border. Now, I'm going to play the video so you can see just how close the soldiers saw this contingent. Okay? Now, let me start from the beginning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share this video. I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to make myself disappear and watch how close this is. This is a soldier with a camera. Watch. Look how close that is. So it's like it's not like it's far away. Here's the fence. Well, what the hell's going on here? I rest my case. Well, let's continue. While Channel 12 has said the footage was taken a month before October 7th, this claim has been disputed, with other reports claiming it was captured just 1 week prior. A Ynet military correspondent called it old news in a post on X, formerly Twitter. These are pickup trucks with Hamas operatives. They have been patrolling the Gaza border road every day since 2015. A report from the news outlet from 2015 backs up this claim with footage of Hamas patrolling on the newly constructed border road some 300 meters from the fence. Yashlami explained to Channel 12 that the patrol featured in the recent video differed from the regular patrols, although she did not explain why. Here's another article. Shin Bet chief amidst the intelligence failure holds himself responsible. Now, at least we have one intelligence failure holding him responsible. When the 9/11 Commission and Joint Inquiry interviewed CIA, they basically said, well, we're past the buck. Tom Wilshire, who was hidden behind a partition, said it wasn't his fault. Kofor Black, the chief of the Counterterrorism Center, said it wasn't his fault. The director of the CIA, George Tenet, said it wasn't his fault. Cowards. In a message to members of the Shin Bet security agency, Chief Ronan Barr claims to hold himself responsible for the lack of an early warning for the Palestinian resistance on Israel. Despite a series of action we carried out, unfortunately on Saturday, we were unable to generate a sufficient warning that would allow the attack to be thwarted, he said, adding, as the one who heads the organization, the responsibility for this is mine. There will be time for investigations. Now we are fighting. And we'll wait on the events. We got to fight, because the bigger issue here is getting rid of Hamas. In other words, getting rid of the Palestinians out of Gaza. Yeah. Well, who else thinks that way? Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet. And it just so happens this attack by Hamas benefits Israel. How so? Is that a fringe conspiracy? Well, let's read an article on October 11, 2023, where basically it says this. Israelis are realizing that Hamas's success is intricately tied to the government's colossal failures. That's true. And that, of course, has brought up the key question of whether Netanyahu and his messianic government can survive the fallout of the brutal attack. Probably won't. However, the greater agenda is at play. The accusations are beginning to mount, even as it might take months, if not years, before we understand what happened, just like 9/11. Netanyahu's strategy has always been to allow Hamas room for maneuvering in order to weaken the Palestinian Authority of Ramallah and Palestinian society more generally. Here is the damning quote. Quote, those who want to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state should support the strengthening of Hamas and the transfer of money to Hamas, Netanyahu stated at a Likud party meeting in March of 2019. This is part of our strategy to differentiate between the Palestinians in Gaza and the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. Following Hamas's attack, this strategic framework has come increasingly under intense fire. However, it is now almost a reality. From the intelligence warnings from the Israeli IDF to their superiors, in which their superiors either got orders from high above in the government or on their own, which seems to coincide with what Netanyahu wants in that quote, to allow the attacks to happen, so that the greater agenda at play here is that twofold. One, the Palestinians are out of Gaza and the West Bank. Two, a regional war with Iran, Lebanon, and Syria involving the U.S. military and disposing of Hezbollah. Is it a fringe conspiracy to think this way? I think not. Now, of course, all the articles and information I read here are going to be afforded to you in the description. And if there's any more updates, which I'm sure there's going to be, I will report them to you without bias, without prejudice. Okay, guys, have a good night. See you in the next video.